Rounding decimals. Well, how do you round decimals? It's pretty easy. You've probably seen this before. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, leave the mess. What you may have not seen before is who's that knocking on my back door? 5 or more, raise the score. And here's how that little saying can help you to round decimals. Let's say that I wanted to round all these to the nearest tenth. Well, this is your tenth spot, so I'm going to put up my door. Who's that knocking at my back door? 5 or more, raise the score. So this is 5 or more. We're going to raise this up to 5.1. If I was rounding this next one to the nearest tenth, let's put up my door. Who's that knocking at my back door? 5 or more, raise the score. Well, this is less than 5, so that would remain 3/10. If I was going to round this to the nearest tenth, let me put up my door. Who's that knocking at the back door? It's a 9, so this would raise up to 2.5. If I was rounding this number to the nearest tenth, put my door up after the tenth, the 7 is knocking at the door, so this would round to 12.1. This one, the 6 is knocking at the door, and this is a 9. Actually, the way I do this, I think of this as 19, so 1 more than 19 is 20. This would round to 2.0, or just 2. And if I were doing this one, rounding it to the nearest tenth, let me put up my door. 7's knocking at the door, so this is going to raise up. This would be 300.2, 302 tenths. What if you were asked to round to the nearest hundredth? Well, remember, who's that knocking on my back door? 5 or more, raise the score. Now this is actually really useful. We're rounding to the nearest hundredth. And this comes in handy when we work with calculators and you're asked to calculate sales tax. And you'll see numbers like this on your calculators, and you're asked to round it to the nearest cent. Well, when you're rounding to the nearest hundredth, you're rounding to the nearest penny, to the nearest cent. So this is your hundredth spot right here. So let's get up our door. And who's that knocking at the back door? It's a 2. So let's think of this in terms of money. This would round to $6.70. On the next one, this is your hundredth spot. Let me get my door up. Who's that knocking at the back door? It's an 8. So this would round up to $1.75. To the nearest hundredth, oh, I'm sorry, that rounds up. It'd be $1.76. The next one, if you saw this on your calculator and you were asked to round it to the nearest hundredth, to the nearest penny, let me get my door up. And this is $21.79. We're going to round it up a penny. It'd be $21.80. If you saw this on your calculator and you were rounding it to the nearest hundredth, who's that knocking on my back door? It's a 2. So this would stay the same, be 74 hundredths or 74 cents. And our last example, let me get my door up. If you were rounding this to the nearest penny, we'd have to round it up a penny to $1.98. Okay. If for some reason you were asked to round to the nearest thousandth, again, we're going to use our little saying here. So we're going to round all these decimals to the nearest thousandth. So this is your tenth, hundredth, thousandths place. Let me get my door up. Who's that knocking on my back door? Well, it's a 1. So this would remain the same. This would be 98 and 88 thousandths. This is your tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Let me get my door up. Who's that knocking on my back door? 5 or more. Raise the score. So we would raise this up to 6.18, and this would raise up to 5. So that's 6 and 185 thousandths. Tenths, hundred thousandths. Let me get my door up. Who's that knocking on my back door? 5 or more. Raise the score. So we're going to raise this up from 89 to 90. And you could either, technically, if you're rounding this to the nearest thousandth, this would be 108 and 90 thousandths. However, 108.09 is the same number. In our last little example here, we have the tenths, hundredth, thousandths. So if I'm rounding it to the nearest thousandth, let's see who's knocking at the back door. It's a 4, so that remains the same. It'd be 0.086. That would be 86 thousandths. So use that little trick when you're rounding decimals.